Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening and welcome to Conservative Talk Radio Show, where we're always right and never left. I'm your host, Chauncey Brown. Welcome to the show. We're excited to have in the studio today a gentleman who was the president of a new organization in light of Black Lives Matter, Antifa, and all of these social left extremist groups coming out denouncing America. This young man took a path to a different direction. Kevin McGary formed Every Black Life Matters, and I'm going to just mention some of the notable quotes that he mentioned in forming this extraordinary organization. Kevin states, Every Black Life Matters considered itself a preeminent justice movement. While this is a notable thought and seemingly virtuous goal, what does this really actually mean? There have been many organizations that I've mentioned in the past that considers themselves justice-related organizations or a movement, social justice, racial justice, and human rights organization in general, all about justice, right? Well, in my personal opinion, no, and that's why Kevin's on the show. How exactly is EBLM different? The best way to clarify and confirm how EBML is profoundly different from most other organizations is we must first answer the question, what is justice? In Kevin's third book, he specifically addressed the issue of justice, and justice, including what it is and what it is not. That said, to put it simply, justice is similarly defined as the embrace of allowing others to merely exist side by side or alongside each other without prejudice and partiality. Certainly more exhaustive expository can be added and amended to this definition, but in its essence, justice can be crystallized and distilled to this simplicity definition. Dr. Martin Luther King so eloquently stated, an injustice anywhere leads to injustice anywhere. As Kevin paraphrased it, EBLM wholeheartedly agrees with this sentiment. I'm proud and honored to invite into the studio my dear friend, Kevin McGary. How are you, sir?
I appreciate the opportunity to join you this afternoon. Or I guess evening.
It's an honor and a pleasure, to get the other side of what's going on in our nation today. As you know, it's lopsided by Antifa, BLM, and these false justice movements, in my own personal opinion. Talk a little bit about, I did a little brief introduction, Kev. Talk a little bit about your humble beginnings, who you are as a person, so my audience will get to know the man, and then how did we get to where we are today with forming this preeminent organization that Every Black Life Matters?
Excellent. Well, let me take you down a little path that God himself sort of put me on.
Amen.
I was
Amen.
Amen. I was born in abject poverty in the Hunters Point project. That's project housing in San Francisco. And so I was born there. First 8 years of my life or so, I was basically living in those kinds of conditions. So, and then we moved to a lower middle class neighborhood in San Francisco. And so I was really, typically a brother from the hood, man. I did everything that your basic hood rats would do. And if you saw boys in the hood, you can just imagine all that kind of, urban stuff is the kind of stuff I was involved in. But, by God's grace, I graduated high school, and then I decided I wanted to go to college and went to San Jose State and got a sociology degree. So I was not only born in abject poverty and understand poverty and being poor to a T, but I was also steeped in liberalism and leftism and progressivism. So I understand that to a T as well. Fundamentally, after I met the love of my life of 34 years now, we got married, and she was born in poverty in Detroit, inner city Detroit. So she had similar background. But we started to really, take God's word seriously, and by His grace, He sort of lifted the veil and allowed us to see some things, allow us to see where we came from, allowed us to see what we fundamentally represent. And it got to a point where we could no longer ignore our sort of civic engagement. We had, to that point, been only civically involved marginally, and every time we were leftist like the rest, and based on tradition. And we realized, wait a minute. We started to look at the platforms and the policies of the parties, and that we said, wait, and she's a psychology. She has a psychology degree out of sociology, and we realized that, well, wait a minute, this is the kind of stuff that we would actually stand up for, we don't actually vote for. And so from that time,
well stated.
From that time, we we began to really take not only our walk with the Lord seriously, but then our civic engagement seriously. And we, even if it was an inconvenient truth, we wanted to be on the side of truth every time. So we started to vote conservatively. And, for us, now we realize it doesn't happen for everybody in our community, Chauncey. There's still a lot of people out there that are diehard leftists because, God didn't lift the veil on them for whatever reason, but He did for us, and He created this path. So from that, I became active, and I was sought out and became, by the Frederick Douglass Foundation, and I became the chapter president and chairman of the Frederick Douglass Foundation of California. So I have the California chapter and a half for the past 10 or so years. And then I'm an executive with the Douglass Leadership Institute. Both of those organizations are being led by Reverend Dean Nelson, an incredible man. And both of those institutions are incredible institutions, basically following the legacy of the Honorable Frederick Douglass. And so from that, I became more and more active. And then last year happened, and we saw what happened for 9 minutes and 45 seconds. And we saw the horror and outrage of that life being drained from it. And it, it caused a lot of issues within our urban communities across the country. We saw churches going out and marching and protesting and being just as violent as others. And we saw, our black and brown businesses mostly being burned to the ground, while BLM was standing to the side cheering Antifa all the way as they did it. And we saw people being set upon just because of their skin color and hit upside the head, and their dinners turned over. And we saw all kinds of, really strange things. And what my co-founder and I realized, co-founder is Neil Mauman, and Neil said, really, Kev, he says, these folks who are now all in with BLM are going to look for a righteous and faithful alternative when the dust settles and they go and find out what Black Lives Matter is really all about. And so we should start something as just a faithful or biblical or just a righteous alternative to BLM. And Amen. So we started, and fundamentally all of our fundamental pillars that we stand on are completely opposite of Black Lives Matter. And so we've been having a great time at it, in the sense that when Black Lives Matter come up to us and say, hey, OG, Black Lives Matter, I get right in their face, put my finger in their chest, and I say, look, Doc, to me, every single Black life matters.
Amen.
Now, does every single Black life matter to you? And then they're like, uh-oh, we stepped in it. They're looking at me dumbfounded. They don't know what to say. And then I continue on. I say, look, the fact is, bruh, we have some folks that are white supremacists, that are racist, that want to fully exterminate the Black population. In their words, Margaret Sanger's words, fully exterminate the Negro population. And so it's important that we don't go along with this foolishness while we're being, mercilessly murdered in the womb. We can't even be born, bruh. And,
Amen.
So it gives me the opportunity to kind of go down the primary talking points. At the end of that, they're kind of awestruck, and they begin to realize that, wow, I guess this OG may have some some knowledge, and I give them a badge and I say, look, man, you know, do what's right, do what your heart is really telling you to do. You know, this BLM stuff is not the right thing. So come and join us. And so they take the badge, and God bless them. I don't know what happens after that, and I don't really care, other than I want to be the dissenting voice, and if I'm the only one, then so be it.
You know, Kevin, thank you so much for this extraordinary introduction. You bring a different perspective. You bring the perspective from the hood, your wife and yourself, projects. I was very fortunate, myself and my listeners know this, and I don't know if you know this. I was very fortunate to grow up in a middle-class background where my father was already a Republican and a civil rights activist in the 1960s. Wow. So I grew up already understanding the various dynamics and social challenges that we had because my father engaged in it and I lived with it growing up. So I was already, for lack of a better term, I was raised woke. Mm-hmm. So I've always been a conservative. I've always been a Republican, and I've always denounced the oppressive policies of the Democratic Party. So I was always an outcast. So for me, at 58 years old, what I've seen over the last 5 years has been refreshing for me to see Black people starting to stand up against this nonsense from the left. And even people like yourself who can tell a better story than me, because a lot of these people on the left have come from troubled backgrounds looking for an identity. And you, through your education, your has filtered through the nonsense, looked at the policies, and have come up with a different conclusion. So what you and your wife are doing is extremely important to raise the level of consciousness and to educate our people, because you can talk the talk, because you and your wife have come from them humble beginnings. And I'm very honored and proud and thankful for you coming on my show to share the dynamic of what you've realized over your lifetime. Yes, as Malcolm X said, we have been bamboozled. We have been hoodwinked, okay? And I don't understand that we had Malcolm X, we had Martin Luther King talk to us about these times today. Mm-hmm. If we did not address these issues 60 years ago, and we're still lost. The massive amount of our people are still going for the shenanigans.
Yep.
And Martin, kick it. Go ahead, man. Kick it.
Matter of fact, Malcolm X called us some political chumps. He admonished us. He said, "Look, man, you know, these white liberals are the worst of the worst, and you need to look at the impact on our community, and you need to vote accordingly. Don't be a political chump." For any of your listeners who doubt that or who wants to hear more about that, because he was much more articulate, I'm just paraphrasing essentially what he said. They can just go and Google Malcolm X and political chumps, and they'll find his exact video and sound bites on that. Also, they can go and research Malcolm X and white liberals, and they'll find a lot on what he said about that as well. But we are doing exactly what he encouraged and admonished us not to do, which is to give up our vote just because of tradition and color. He told us to be thoughtful and hold these people accountable and only vote for them if they're actually doing something for our community. And I can confirm to you, because I've come from where I've come from, I understand it to a T. Brothers can't step to me and say, "Kev, you don't understand. You was raised with a silver spoon, or you've been a Republican or conservative." No.
Exactly.
No, Lose me with that one, man. No, I'm looking with eyes wide open. I'm a sociologist. My wife is more of a psychologist. We look with eyes open and objectively, and what we see is that, man, on that leftist side, it is nothing but carnage and destruction, and they are using us as political tools, actually fools and pawns, so they can stay in power. And we have too many people.
Speak, Malcolm. Speak, Malcolm. Speak, Malcolm.
Man, with their eyes closed because they're the real God that they worship, Chauncey, and